Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session on what it takes to be the market-leading payment service provider in an era of the new normal. My name is Rogier Roepen van der Voort, and I'm the CEO of PCN. I think it's needed to say that a lot has happened over the last 12 plus months, and the world that we live in has certainly changed. There's different behavior that we're all showing that has asked for new products and new approaches, whether that's working from home, hiring remote, restaurants offering to-go menus, the rise of e-commerce, but how that has affected payment behavior and what it takes to be the market-leading payment service provider in an era of the new normal. That's what we'll find out today. We'll talk about value-added services, we'll talk about data, we'll talk about RegTech, and we'll talk about the post-pandemic merchants landscape. I won't do that by myself. I'm honored to be joined by a panel of five payment experts today. First is Houssem Assadi. He's the CEO of Deja Mobile and also the co-founder. And they have become one of the leading providers of white label solutions for the digital payments landscape in Europe. Before founding Deja Mobile, Houssem worked for Orange, and he was the director of security and trusted transactions at Orange Lab. His team delivered several projects dealing with NFC, mobile payments, and security of networks, platforms, and devices. And Houssem is also a graduate of ENSTA Paris Tech and holds a PhD in computer science. Houssem, welcome. Good to have you. Secondly is Andrea Dunlop. She's the managing director of the payment division of the Access Group. She's also an angel investor and a non-executive director, and also the co-founder of InvestFem, which connects female founders to investors committed to funding female entrepreneurs. She's been named one of the most influential women in payments in 2018 and appearing in Payments Power 10. Andrea is also the deputy chair of the Emerging Payments Association Advisory Board and board member, if that's not enough, board member of the European Women in Payments Network. Andrea, welcome as well. Then there's Lee Jones. He's the managing director of Northern Europe at Worldline Global. He is the commercial leader there, and he and his team have an unparalleled track record of helping organizations deliver a reliable, secure, and fuss-free checkout experience. Lee is passionate about driving solutions that deliver real value to his customers and has helped Ingenico into new markets where the introduction of cashless payments is just starting to emerge. Super relevant for what we're discussing here today. And while supporting existing customers in their ambition to meet and exceed shopper expectations is something which highly interests Lee. Lee, welcome as well. And then we have Christos Tiniotsu. He's a director at iSpiral. He's responsible for formulating the strategic vision of iSpiral. They build KYC and AML solutions. Christos has an academic and working background in the US and Cyprus with huge experience and knowledge in the area of AML and fraud detection, with the focus on implementing transaction monitoring solutions and finding money laundering and fraud anomalies through automation. Christos, also welcome to you. And then last but certainly not least is Neil Smith. He's the head of partnerships EMEA at Forter. Neil's 28-year career has centered around helping merchants, processors, and financial institutions to successfully navigate the ever-changing payment ecosystem. He has held a variety of technical, commercial, and leadership roles, inclusive of fraud, risk, and compliance. And prior to joining Forter, where he leads partnerships, Neil has held senior positions at companies including Visa, Verify, and FIS. Neil, also welcome to have you. And to everyone again, welcome to have you today on the panel. Excited to be discussing with you the topics that we have for today, as well a bit of a household for everyone who's viewing this. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the app, and I'll make sure to get them to our panel as much as possible. But maybe let's start with a question to you, Andrea. I mean, pre-COVID, merchants who did not sell online nor accept digital payments were forced into a do or die. And they now face digital shoppers, of course, who abandon baskets the moment that they experience friction. So how can payment service providers build a strategy which nurtures the launch of value-added value-added offerings for corporates, SMEs, and consumers?
First of all, it's great to be here and great to be amongst this panel. So thank you for inviting me. To tackle that long question, because I think there's a couple of angles to it. What I would say is that you really have to understand your customer base. And, if you're really going to create value adds, there are nuances as to how you tackle that, depending on what type of verticals that your customers come through. But I guess with the last year of COVID, even longer actually, many retailers that didn't have a digital experience should have really already been through that pain barrier. And will now recognise the value of the new skills and capabilities that e-commerce actually brings. So while they may be early in their journey, they should start to see the benefits of that. And it's funny because for years within the payments industry, we've all talked about omni-channel, and it hasn't really been a reality. But now I think with all that's gone on and the digital acceleration, omni-channel is a reality now. And I think anyone running a business has to accept that customers are coming in via multiple channels to your business, and you need to be able to cater to that. And I do think there's some interesting things on the horizon. So I'm probably being a little bit talking futuristic, but I see it myself, and I can actually give some good use cases, especially with my husband, actually. The snap and shop that's occurring. It's early days for this, but I think some of the new technology that is starting to come in and add value to consumers around how they're making their decisions, I think is going to drive e-commerce further. So when I talk about Snap and Shop, some good examples, and maybe it says a lot about the age group, is wine and plants. So my husband is forever taking pictures of wine bottles to work out, I really like that, I'm going to buy that. And it's the same with plants. And I think this type of experience we're going to see in other areas, which will continue to drive that experience. And then the other one that really stands out to me that I wanted to mention to everyone is the augmented reality. And one of the ones that kind of makes me laugh, you kind of think of the sexy areas like clothes shopping and makeup generally for women is where this works really well. But the one that did make me smile when I saw it was carpets. And people picking their carpet, but actually being able to visualize it in their own home. And the thing that brought it to life to me was actually some friends of mine were just selling their house and one of their rental properties completely empty of furniture. And they were able to create this experience where they actually put all this fake furniture in augmented reality to sell that online. And I thought these are really interesting propositions that are starting to come through. And for me, I think this is what is going to enhance the drive across digital and e-commerce. And this is some of the transformation. I mean, it's early days, but I think we are seeing some interesting aspects start to come through.
Absolutely, yeah. Lee, do you see the same with your clients?
Yeah, just to say, I think I'd get on well with your husband, Andrew, if he likes wine and plants. I think from my side, there are so many different value-added services and services that can add value out there to merchants and customers. What's really important is that people collaborate. And I always think nobody knows as much as all of us. So it's working together, and also as sort of payment service, solution providers like ourselves, we have to listen. And we have to be careful as to where we place our bets as well, because there are so many things you can do. But actually, there are only certain things that you actually should really do. So working out those things that will deliver a real tangible return to an organization, but also help improve that sort of customer experience. So it reduces friction, reduces the different steps to get somebody from that point of making a decision to buy to actually completing the checkout. It is really, really key. And to Andrea's point there as well around the sales channels, that consistency of experience, I think, is really important. Sales channels need to come together. So a few years ago, I remember talking to big merchants, and you'd almost find that the e-commerce team was almost like the worst enemy, if you like, of the in-store team. And they'd be, challenging each other, trying to sort of compete from a sales figure perspective and stuff. But the world's changed now, and everybody's looking at it more as complementary channels. But I think realizing that actually a lot of transactions now sometimes start in one channel and finish in another. And that creates challenges for organizations and service providers alike. But as we go forward, it's going to be increasingly important that there's a real alignment there, and this sort of real sort of frictionless, fuss-free way of people being able to navigate and make their decisions and complete their purchases in the channel they want to do so.
Do you see then a lot of new services being offered? I mean, you talk about customer experience, about friction. Is it offering more services, or is it about keeping it as simple as possible for the consumer?
I think it can be a bit of both. I think simple is good. Some customers just want to get in and get out. They don't want to waste around. They decide what they want. They go to a shop, they buy it, and the faster the better. They don't want to queue. Or online, the fewer the steps, the less interruption they have and the less hassle, the better. But we've seen services ourselves where even at the end of a transaction completing, a merchant may choose to survey the customer to say, how was that experience today? Because there can be really valuable insight in that. So maybe even adding sometimes a step can actually be the right thing to do to help a merchant then refine how that experience would be for the next shopper, or when that shopper actually hopefully comes back, and buys again from that organization. So they continue looking at improving. So I think it depends. And that's where collaboration needs to come in. And that's when people need to sort of spend time working together to look at what is best for my business and for my customers.
Yeah,
I really like that, Lee. And I think a post-payment strategy is really important for companies to learn from. Can I ask, on your experience, one of the things actually I had experience recently was following Brexit, is buying goods and not realising they were coming in from the EU, and then picking up those additional charges as they came in. One of the things actually I was talking about someone else in the industry with was just making sure there was very clear transparency around those additional delivery costs, which I think in the last 12 months it's been a little bit more challenging with how we're adjusting to the new ways of working with the EU.
Yeah, I think it's fair. And even for us, if we're shipping, just as for example, devices from the UK now out into Europe as well, it's just making sure that communication is clear and that people's expectations are appropriately set. Because there's nothing worse. I've had it myself, where you're expecting a delivery for something and then you get a card through the door and says, can you please pay me some extra money to actually get the goods that you think you've already paid the postage and packaging and the delivery on finally to you. It's not a great experience. So it's about expectation management and communication. Absolutely, Andrea.
Agree.
Andrea, do you see, because you've seen the B2C and the B2B sides, do you see that there are differences there in terms of value-added services or not?
Who is that to?
To you, Andrea, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I have a little bit on both sides of that myself currently. So I definitely think there are different experiences. And I think, it's working through with your existing businesses on what you see the flow as, but then understanding that next level down. And one of the things that we're really focused on at the moment in my company is really nailing down the different use cases between the particular verticals to try and get that experience better. And traditionally, that hasn't always been easy on the cards front. But when I look at open banking, I see a lot more flexibility around kind of creating that much more customer-centric experience, because there's a lot more things you can do with that technology than we've always been able to do necessarily with card schemes.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting. How do you see that? What's the impact on the merchants that you serve today?
Yeah, so payment is a two-sided market, okay? So we need to think about the expectations of both merchants and consumers. To answer directly your question regarding merchants, and as Lee mentioned, all merchants need today to build an optimal omni-channel experience, okay, for their consumers, because of course now consumers are used to use all the available channels to shop, okay. And if we think in particular about physical stores, so all of us have seen those long lines in or in the grocery stores in particular during the first lockdown at least, and this is not of course an optimal situation. All of merchants today who manage physical stores need solutions to better manage those lines and provide, let's say, quick and safe checkout experiences for their consumers. And this is brought to them by payment solution vendors, providing, for example, very flexible payment POS terminals or software POS terminals like we do, in order to allow them easily build checkout spots within their shops. If we think about, for example, the big retail stores. So, yeah, this is clearly an evolution and a new need on the merchant side. On the consumer side, one of the main topics for us as again payment vendor is of course the raise and of the contactless payments. Just to take one figure, according to Mastercard, in Q3 2020. The penetration of contactless payments represented 41%, while it was only 30% 1 year ago. So it's really an important evolution. And here again, we need as payment providers to bring the best possible solutions in order to equip all the merchants, even the smallest ones, with contactless acceptance solutions.
Yeah, but there's clearly a need for indeed more contactless payments when people go in store. I'm sure you definitely see the effect of that. Great. I think something else that is very much connected to value-added services and that payment service providers deal with all the time is, of course, data. So maybe, Neil, a question to you. How can merchants and providers collaborate, you think, in your opinion, or what you see in the market, to provide more personalized and more unique and more regulatory compliance services?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And obviously great to be here with everyone on the panel. Data is interesting. It's Marmite, right? Some people like data and the way that data is used, and other people hate the way that data is used, specifically when it becomes intrusive into kind of marketing. So I think we have to be careful on how we align that. So Forta, for example, we're very much on the using data to protect people, protect partners, protect merchants. I think bringing merchants and partners together, using the wealth of data that's in the industry, using it in the right way at the right time, will do two things. One, allow consumers to feel safe in the knowledge that when they're shopping, they're not going to get compromised. And secondly, it allows both the partner and the merchant to really understand, and we call it actor or the persona behind that transaction. I think we'll get onto it maybe later on, but we've always, as an industry, over the last 40 years, been focused on the transaction. And I define transaction by things that are very linear and very rudimental. Card information, expiry date, things that I call clunky. It's just great and it's served a purpose. But I think importantly, don't we want to know who's behind the transaction, right? And using data in that way. And so you can leverage, merchants and partners can leverage that. So if they know it's Neil Smith, they trust it's Neil Smith performing the transaction, then of course there'll be more propensity to engage with that customer on a regular basis to provide things that they might need, not using the data in that way, but knowing the person.
What kind of data is that then? Is that biometrics data? Is that, I guess, age? Is it, what kind of data are you looking at then?
Or everything, yeah, all of the above. But with things like behavioural science, so, I, as my digital footprint, typically human beings are habitual by nature. It's very difficult to get away from that, no matter how much you try, right? Dining room experience with pre-COVID, if 6 or 7 people come around for dinner, I can guarantee if you do that, the following week, most people will sit in the same place as they did last time. It's just habit. And so we do the same thing online as we do physically. So it's, yes, using things like, am I right-handed? Do I use my right thumb on my phone, or do I use my left hand? How long do I hover over particular goods or services within the web page if we're talking about online? Even in store, I'm fairly sure subconsciously many people choose to go right or left around the store, and they navigate to things that are interesting to them. It's no different from online. So yes, in Forta we use 6,000 data points at any given time to make sure that it is Rohit that's performing that transaction, and I'm sure others do the same.
It's crazy. Christos, how do you see that?
I'm glad to be here as well. I totally agree with Neil. It's a matter of GDPR. We all know that GDPR it's here to stay. So we need to be careful what we are gathering, and that we are in line with what the data processor is. We have to be in line with that. And now, over and above that, when we're collecting data as far as the account goes, in order to do the onboarding and the risk assessment, whether we need to gather information regarding as Neil said before, regarding the behavioral or biometric elements needed so that we can use them for the fraud detection. The basic point here is that we do it in a frictionless way, so we can gather data so that we don't bother the user at the end of the day all the time, either when we open the account or when the customer is doing a transaction. So it's very important that we come to the point that we are not asking for the clients to put the code that they get from an SMS in order to complete the transaction. We need to start using biometric and behavioral data elements so that we can authenticate the user using those data elements without being obnoxious or asking the client all the time new data. There are new data sources that we need to be getting data from, such as publicly available data sources. There are so many data that we can find on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter. There are other external data sources that could be used for identification, such as governmental data sources that are already open so that we can use them during the account opening. So definitely having good data sets is very important during the whole life cycle of the client, from the account opening to the continuous transactional relationship that we have with the client.
How do you see that then, that collaboration between merchants and providers in order to make sure that indeed that there are clear data sets to be used? Is there specific collaboration that you see that is very successful with the clients that you work with?
The important point here is that merchants should be accessing data that are qualified and at the same time are validated, so that they don't use data that eventually will not be able to do the account opening or the onboarding. So it's very important to have a partnership that you know that you are getting the data that have been validated and qualified.
Yeah, that makes sense. Neil, did you want to add to that? Sorry.
Yeah, I totally agree with Christoph there. I think also, merchants have it hard enough, right? So they want to do everything in isolation, whether it's, looking at processing companies or PSD2, 3D Secure or fraud systems. You want to partner up with, gateways, PSPs, or foreign banks that might have all those solutions in one place, right? There's nothing to say that merchants shouldn't have their own individual protection, so looking at fraud systems, but you want to try and make that journey for that customer as seamless as possible. And I think Andrea or maybe Lee's touched on it, some friction is good. You've got to have an element of friction, but not necessarily interrupt the customer on their journey. You want to provide that friction in the background to identify the person making the transaction, so that then when they go onto the next site, we know it's them, they know it's them, the shopping experience is much better.
When you say friction is good, what kind of friction do you mean?
Limited friction. Lots of friction is not good. So I think, Christoph, you brought it up, behavioural science, biometrics. I think, historically we use things like passwords, PIN codes, one-time passwords. All this stuff is great for the moment, but we need to, as an industry, we need to really start moving away from that, really start putting elements in the background. That means that if I'm out at Eldon Forest and I want to make a purchase online, so it's somebody's birthday and I want to send flowers, and I'm waiting for the one-time passcode and it's not going to come to me in the forest, I'm not got a problem. I want to be able to have that experience without the pain that's gone with it with one-time passwords. That's what I mean by relevant friction.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, okay. Indeed, I think the the use of data is very much to decrease fraud. And maybe Christoph, to you, I mean, we know that regulators in general are very strict, right? When reviewing procedures, when looking at processes and systems, and especially when it goes or when it's regarding money laundering and fraud detection and prevention. What is your kind of recommended approach to tackle this subject?
I mean, the regulators, they're not giving straight guidelines of what you need to be doing. I mean, there are regulators in Europe and in UK that they're telling you that you can identify a client using qualified and validated external data sources, but they're not giving you a guideline that, I mean, what kind of, let's say, approach you need to take in order to avoid fraud. But definitely there are some guidelines there that, I mean, you can follow in order to be able to detect fraud, either with an expert-based solution or with a machine learning-based solution, or with a combination of those. So eventually, definitely, I mean, the data quality is of huge importance when you're dealing with compliance, AML, and fraud. So, I mean, as you probably know, when you put data garbage in, you get data garbage out. So you definitely need to be able to have quality data sets in order to be, sure that, I mean, you are in line with what the regulator is requesting.
Yeah, and because you guys build obviously a lot of KYC and AML solutions, how do you think that kind of regulatory technology can then play a part in secure customer onboarding and lifecycle experience? I mean, especially now that there's just more and more onboarding that is done remote, right? How does RegTech come in there?
I mean, definitely, we are going towards that direction. So automatic KYC and automatic onboarding, right now it has been accepted by the regulators themselves. I mean, in most of the European countries, the AML5 has been transposed on the local legislations of every country, and the ADAS directive has been transposed on the local legislations as well. If you combine those two, I mean, it clearly gives you a guideline, and the regulators see that. It gives you a guideline of starting accepting the client remotely, using robust solutions that are already out there. For example, liveness, detection selfies, video identifications, verifying that the official identity documentation is authenticated and it has not been forged or tampered. The biometric face matching that Neil has mentioned before. All these type of technologies definitely will be minimizing the fraud as far as the account opening, but during the whole life cycle of the client. Because, for example, in the gaming industry, you don't only need the use of the liveness during the account opening, but also when the client logs in order to put a bet. You don't want someone else to be betting on your behalf. So there are a lot of technology out there that definitely minimizes the risk of who you're onboarding, and at the same time minimizes the time that you need to onboard someone.
You can be faster and efficient, basically.
Definitely, yeah.
More successful.
Yeah.
Do you see that there's across those different industries, there's more of a need of this kind of automated onboarding or regulatory technology than in others, or is it just as broad as it gets? There's need.
I mean, definitely financial services. It's a must. I see the gaming industry a lot. Right now, I see the industry of the food delivery. So we have a lot of requests that there are they want to, let's say, identify the writers before they start their shift. So there are different industries that are moving towards that direction.
Yeah, that makes sense. Andrea, how do you see that? How do you see that the regulatory technology play a part in the secure onboarding?
Yes, so I mean, I see this as pretty key. And to be honest, I mean, I was previously running another merchant acquiring business for another company for many years. And, you know, I mean, we had this technology. It's been out there for a long time. What I will say is what has changed over recent years is that when this technology first came into play, it was very much a back office function. What I do see is there's been a little bit of a shift. And it's much more now that there's a sales and marketing play in that, because again, it's coming back to what we spoke about earlier. It's about ensuring the customer experience through that onboarding aspect. So I do think there's been a bit of a switch. And I think also something that Lee touched on a little bit earlier on is that in the new world that we're in, and I'll use the old-fashioned word omni-channel, you know, and I'd love to know anyone who's got a true bloody omni-channel. So if you have, email me because I'd like to hear about it. Customer information is scattered across different, you know, products and solutions. And so, you know, I think one of the things that, you know, you have to bear in mind, if you've got a customer that's actually got, you know, if you're doing physical point of sale and e-commerce, and you're trying to board a net new merchant, then it's making sure that you're not asking for information in multiple places. And that's the same for when customers are boarding and you know, trying to give their details if they've already been seen by this merchant in one place, that hopefully you're storing all that kind of information. So I think it's frustrating when people have to go back through processes. But I think the onboarding tools are much more sophisticated than they've ever been. And actually, Christos touched on another point around the ongoing aspect. So I think we've matured as an industry that it's not a one-time board and we all move on. Those days are long gone in the regulatory world. You board them and you are continually looking at those clients. You're continually underwriting. You're continually monitoring the transactions. But what is changing is the monitoring of all of those aspects are now moving much more to AI and machine learning technology, because really it's all become so much more sophisticated that the days of being able to do this, and there were acquirers out there using this, it was all on Excel spreadsheets. That, you know, those days are long gone, and companies shouldn't be doing that anymore. And you can't, with the amount of data points that are coming in, you need much more sophisticated technology. So that actually it's only exceptions that are going out to the teams to analyze what's gone wrong. So I do think, I mean, certainly my time in the industry, and you know, it's been a long time, I can see transformation certainly in the last 10 years and 5 years in this space. I mean, you're really not in a good position if you haven't got some sort of automated onboarding, is my view.
Neil, I mean, do you see that as well? I mean, in terms of how you go about offering these type of solutions? I mean, when you look at big data security breaches, for example, I think not necessarily payments related, but Facebook, I think it was last week, 500 million users' phone, email, and passwords leaked onto the World Wide Web. So how do you see, how critical is it that integration of AI, of machine learning, and payment systems to combat those kind of data breaches?
Hugely, you know, obviously Porter was born from that space and that world. We're great believers in full automation, using as much data, artificial intelligence, machine learning as possible to protect. Right? I think, you know, big data breaches, Facebook or a big merchant, whatever, that comes down to cybersecurity. That comes down to doing your homework, securing your castle, not leaving the door open. I think it becomes more complicated over time. You know, I think Andrew just touched on it. Technology has advanced so rapidly in the last 10 years. I think it took us, I don't know the exact numbers, so don't quote me, but you know, went from cash to card. It took quite a long time, and that was a big shift, you know, a paradigm shift into tech. And then cards out to omni-channel mobile payment. If you look at that collectively, that was a very short space of time. Now what we're seeing now is disruption, innovation happening continuously on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis. So I think we need to be careful with that. And where I'm getting to the point is that more kinks in the chain can be more susceptible to breaches. You have to do your homework. With anything, right? If you plan before going live, then there's not going to be problems. If you don't plan properly, you don't analyse, you don't look, you don't use the right teams and the right skill sets, and all come together to collaborate to secure your house or your castle or your business in this case, then there could be a problem. So I don't see them as one, they're two separate things, very much cybersecurity versus using information in the right way to protect the journey.
Because I guess fraudsters also get obviously smarter and smarter, so they have their own AI and ML tools almost.
Yeah, I think one of the things, off topic a little bit, but everyone's relying on 3D Secure, right? PSD2 and 3D Secure, and that's the whole silver bullet. It really isn't. We really should not be thinking about moving away from fraud monitoring and everything that we know, both expertise as humans, but obviously technology. Do not rely on one tech, because as sure as X is X, 3D Secure down the track will have to update some new versions, and the fraudsters are always, in the background, right? They're always ready with their tech to try and infiltrate.
Yeah.
I think you can see over the last 12 months, there's been an increase in fraud. The scammers are absolutely working overtime at the moment. So, I mean, the days of, and I mentioned Excel sheets, but there will be providers out there that are using simple rules-based aspects around trying to capture some of this. And in this day and age where you see what's happened in the last, 12 months where fraudsters are at a heightened level, those types of solutions should be long gone. And, actually, I think it's a little bit shameful if there's companies out there that are still working in that way. They should have much more sophisticated tools. I'm being quite harsh, quite frankly, but I honestly feel that it is shameful on them if they're still operating those types of legacy solutions. That is not acceptable in today's world. Not acceptable.
No. A colleague of myself, my colleague back here, 25 years ago, wrote rules and tech and we thought it was quite innovative, to alert the old Nokia communicator to tell us that there's a fraud attack. If people are still using that, then we should close up the doors, because you've got to move away from legacy-based systems into the new world.
Christos, how do you see that? How critical is it to you, that integration?
I mean, definitely. Right now, most of the organizations out there are using the expert-based or rule-based solutions. I mean, they are widely used, to be honest. What I see myself is that not too many are going to be shifting towards the machine learning based solutions anytime soon. So I see a hybrid approach of using the starting point of using an expert based rule based engine with let's say a very robust tool of segmenting the rules so that you can minimize the false positives. So this is I think for all of us, this is the goal: minimizing the false positives and maximizing the true positives, so that we can give more intelligent, let's say, cases or observations to the compliance officers that they need to investigate. Okay, so and the compliance officers, they have minimum time. I mean, their time is limited. So the target here is to have a hybrid approach so that we can start getting more historical information. So those historical information can be used later on the machine learning models, on the supervised and finally on the supervised models actually. So I mean, I see a hybrid model so that we can gain more experience on that, and at the same time, I don't see the critical thinking of the compliance officer to be replaced by any type of machine learning. The critical thinking of the investigators or the compliance officers are never going to be they're not going to be go away. We need the compliance officers.
I would agree with that, but I think I'm with you. I think it's a two-pronged approach. You will always need that skill set and people to look at it, but you need the technology to automate and analyze very quickly and to get those exceptions out to someone who can review and validate. And I think that's the place that we have to get to across the industry in a better way. It cannot all just be reliant on people. There's too much data to analyze. And this is why we have so much fraud at the moment, is because we haven't quite got there on this process.
Definitely. I mean, we need to go with a data-driven approach instead of an expert-based approach. We totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Neil, do you feel the same, or is this going outside of Forter's philosophy, which is everything being automated, or you think that there will be a world where everything will be automated when it comes to this?
Good question. I'll ask in two parts. I think there's definitely upfront. So if you're looking at boarding, whether it's customers through application for credit, or whether it's boarding merchants upfront to partners, BSPs, acquirers, etc., there's a need to ensure that and a human intervention is required, right? Because there's no better than a human analysing those exceptions. Andrew's right, we need to get those exceptions really quickly. In our world, they've already been boarded, right? The customer's making the purchase. Now, you put rules in there and humans in there to analyse those transactions, see if they're genuine or otherwise. It can become quite, loose, because you've got human emotion involved. No matter if we try not to be, you've got a human involved, which is absolutely right in certain circumstances. There's no reason why you can't push certain exceptions to investigators and analysts in the full transactional life cycle of that purchase. But AI and ML has to be the way forward. Especially with so much data being analysed in like sub 500 milliseconds, no human could do that. Those data points and looking at all that information to say, right, it's Neil, it's definitely him, he's performed the transaction, it's impossible. And so I do believe we'll get to a space where there's a happy medium, as Christoph is saying, up in two parts of the journey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we need that automation in order to improve or assure a good customer experience and reduce friction, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, if you look at some of the, I won't name them, but I mean, there's well-known fintechs out there that you can read about in certain newspapers. And what they do really well, they really do the onboarding process really, really excellently well, and customers are boarded quickly. But when it goes wrong, the exception processes and the fallout from that, they really struggle to deal with. So I do think there are learnings there that you can see in a number of the fintechs where they've gone fully automated. And I think that kind of gives a view. And it was funny, actually, I was talking about it today with some work colleagues on some of our own experiences, is making sure we still have that human touch and that exception aspect, that people can come in and still engage directly, that it's not all fully automated. But there is a halfway house on this, and you can see that.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting. Look, whilst we're looking ahead, if we look post-pandemic, which is hopefully going to be soon, what was, Hussam, a question to you. What do you think the merchant payments industry looks like, according to you, post-pandemic? Is it much different?
Much different, I don't know, but at least, yeah, different for sure, because I think we had a very quick learning curve during the past year, okay? We collectively, I mean, all the industry, not only merchants, all the payment industry. And for example, we succeeded to deploy very quickly, let's say, for example, click and collect solutions, contactless payment solutions in shops who have never used those kind of, let's say, technology maybe a couple of years ago. So this is already an achievement, and this is here to stay. I mean, this is really sort of an investment for the future. And I could imagine that the shopping in the future will be, of course, omni-channel, even if Andrea thinks that omni-channel maybe is a theoretical word, but at least I could use in a, let's say, seamless way all the channels that are available at my shops, at the shops that I am used to go to. And on the merchant side, they will have the symmetrical, let's say, situation, meaning that they will be able to manage all those channels in a seamless way. So have a unified view of the consumers across the channels, have a single view of all, when it comes to payment, all the flows, whatever payment flows coming from online channels or physical channels, and also have better flexibility in managing all the payment spots. What I call payment spots are either, of course, payment terminals or any future form factors of devices or software allowing merchants to to capture payments, to get paid, of course, in a secure way. We discussed security and risk management just before. So, yeah, I think we are already living in the future of shopping and payments. Again, with the rise of online, the start of omni-channel experience with some at least advanced merchants, and also, of course, the massive use of mobile payments, digital payments, contactless payments, which is now at least in let's say Western economies standard. Okay, so yeah.
Lee, would you agree?
Yeah, I would. I think definitely things have changed. We can all see that, and they've probably changed forever as well. One of the things that I've been really impressed with merchants around is that they really acknowledge now that the trust that is given to them should never be taken for granted from a customer. I think, people realize that trust is hard to earn, but it's very easy to lose as well. So there's a real important factor there. And it only takes you to go and, visit merchants and, buy things over the last few months to realize and look at the measures businesses have had to go to, not only just to protect customers, but also even sometimes to protect their staff as well. I think when it comes to delivering, good experiences as well, it's going to be really important that people look at what is the journey and that experience they want to deliver to the shopper and that customer. I read a report recently that said if a customer has one bad experience, they'll, 2/3 of shoppers will abandon a brand after one bad experience. If it goes to 2 or 3 bad experiences, it will rise to 92%. And that is business and customers that could be lost potentially forever. So a lot of work needs to go into making sure experiences are personalized, they're relevant, they're dynamic, and they're focused on that particular individual. And that sometimes is easier said than done. So like I said there as well about the cross-channel piece and really using some of the data that's available, we're seeing a lot of work around things like tokenization, and things where card data is tokenized. But those tokens then are shared across the different platforms to allow people to not just track a cardholder journey and see what they're doing, but actually to drive, really complementary cross-channel use cases, to get actionable insight and really to deliver those specific, unique experiences to individuals. And the technology exists to do that today. I think the other thing for me as well is that, it's about collaboration as well. It's about merchants, payment service providers, and other parts of the industry all coming together. Because I said earlier, nobody knows as much as all of us. And it's only by sort of listening, working together, challenging each other, that these, experiences that people really aspire to deliver will actually come through. We're also seeing now, some technology really starting to come to the fore where customers are starting to use not just their own devices to buy things online, but actually to do their physical shopping in stores using technology like scan and pay. So the different ways people are going to shop in the future and are starting to shop now, it's just going to continue to evolve and grow. We're seeing things like the contactless limit now increase, but again, the foundation for me is absolutely about trust. Hard to earn, but keep it because it's very, very easy to lose it.
Do you see that? I mean, looking maybe in terms of the competitive landscape, then, do you see now that there are more, the payment behavior is changing, let's put it like that, that there is also more companies now entering the payment space in terms of offering payment services? Think of merchants, for example, now offering their own payment solution because they are just a big enough group to build their own payment solution, or how do you see that going forward?
I think there'll always be change. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I was going to, sorry, I didn't interject. Yeah, I think there's always going to be new companies and new ways of doing things that come to the fore. And I think that's really healthy to see, people looking at it and say, how could you do things differently? How could we, deliver that experience in a way that's more specific to how we want to deliver it to our customers? So I think change is inevitable, and I think it's a good thing.
I hope so. Definitely. Yeah.
And I would complete this answer by just reminding that we have a huge challenge. Cash is still representing more than 80% worldwide of the transactions. Okay, so we have a collective challenge as an industry to bring more and more digital payment options and solutions to all the parties of the ecosystem. So it's very good news that a lot of new, let's say, services are built and brought to the market by merchants, startups, fintechs, whatever kind of actors. But because again, the challenge is huge. And think about the emerging markets. For example, currently we are working with partners in Latin America and introducing digital payments, both on the issuing side with digital wallet solutions based on NFC tokenization, and on the acceptance side based on software POS, so purely software-based contactless payment acceptance solutions. And this is really, we are experiencing a very exciting, a situation where we need to introduce massively introduce those technologies, because there's a huge gap to fill. So if retailers, for example, are introducing their own closed loop payment systems, good, very good, because they will contribute to this offer of getting rid of cash, because obviously cash is not, relevant anymore, at least relevant, let's say, mean of payment for economic and also safety reasons. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will disagree, obviously, because of the number of countries that are still using cash as our leading payment method. But it's a logical transition, let's say, with everything that's going on, and everything will become more digital. A couple of questions from the audience, also maybe in line with that. This came from Lima Edmund. Lima, thank you very much for your question. Do you guys, and feel free to chip in from the panel, do you see social media payments being safe in terms of fraud and privacy? And what is it you advise to small businesses who are using social media to sell their products online?
Oh, I do think it's important for businesses to be present on a number of platforms and follow your customers. So if they're jumping from Facebook to TikTok to Pinterest, so I do think it's important to be present on those. What I will say is that if you've got kids, you'll appreciate this, that the social media platforms, there are some challenges, especially with young people, around purchases and a high level of fraud. I think if some of that could be solved, then I definitely see a lot of opportunity in that. But right now, I do see some interesting patterns off of some of those particular social media platforms, unfortunately, that I think affect a lot more young people.
Still not the one.
If anyone else has had that experience with kids.
Great. All right. Thank you very much, Andrea. Another question that came in from Mina Amer. Mina, also thank you for your question. Does voice identification or voice ID reduce fraud? And should we be worried about the large-scale harvesting of our voice prints? Sorry for that.
Oh, that was a phone a friend for a minute.
I'll go first then. Yes, obviously voice recognition is a way of protecting yourself against fraud. And I think, if you look back in history, there's many different ways that we as humans have unique things, including signature, funnily enough, probably one of the most unique things. Even though people would say it can be forged, actually, if you're using the right analysts and the right tools, the signature is very unique. So voice is also quite unique, different wavelengths, etc., etc. So I think, yes, it does protect fraud. I think it would be silly not to say it doesn't. It comes down to protecting yourself, cybersecurity, right? So how do you protect your voice? Where is it being stored? How is it being stored? How is it wrapped up in a token so it can't be accessed? I mean, there's lots of different ways. So there's two parts to that. I think I can't answer that myself. I don't know. We don't store voice recognition at Falter. We don't use it, obviously. So, but yes, it's about storage of personal data and how that takes place. I'll pass it to somebody else.
Yeah, I agree with Neil on that. I imagine if someone gets into the database and steal all the voices that have been stored for identification purposes. I mean, those voices could be used, and those voices, I mean, you can change your password, but you cannot change your voice. So eventually, if someone steals the voice and they can tamper it, they can easily use it for fraudulent, let's say, activities.
lot what you see with that deep fake at the moment, right? Where they use voices indeed to have people say
with
stuff.
Yeah,
but they've never actually said. So great. Another question from Milan Stenko. Milan, also thank you very much for your question. Maybe some technologies are faster than other basic things in our life. What do you guys think? Will there be huge differences in terms of the consequences for our life or human society when it comes to those technologies?
I think if we use technology the right way, definitely will help us as a human race. I mean, but we need to use it with the right way. I mean, I think that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, Neil, sorry.
Yeah, I think technology is brilliant, right? It helps us in so many different ways in life. I think the key word there is human, right? We don't want to lose control of the technology, not to fast forward 30, 40 years in the future where robots might be controlling us. But I don't think we should get to that stage, in my personal opinion. Right? I think there's a collaboration between human and tech, and that should always remain.
Yeah, but always, I mean, right now there is a lot of discussions related to the ethical points of artificial intelligence. So we need to be very careful on, from the ethical point of view as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The biases, because at the end of the day, there's still human interaction into creating that. So I've read a lot of articles on the ethics, the biases that can be built in. So I mean, there's not standards yet as such. I think that's also part of the challenge.
Yeah, on that, another question just came in from Nuno Martins. Will EU biometric data protection compliance laws, you think, be used / spread worldwide?
Neil?
Stumped as well.
I would say yes, a difficult. Will it be used worldwide? I don't know every clause and every law in detail, so I can't answer that piece. I think is it useful? Will it be adopted? For sure. I think we end up worldwide trying to adopt, whether it's coming down from the US or coming out from the EU or coming from the UK, wherever it might be. I think it's good and it's right and used in the right way. Then of course things will get adopted. Elements of it will get adopted.
Does that mean that we're still almost catching up with the technology that we created when it comes to regulation in many ways?
I think yeah, in general, I mean, regulation is here to help us comply and to be in line with what is needed. Definitely, I mean, the GDPR directive, for example, is setting some guidelines of how we should be using technology and how we'll be using data that we get from the clients. So eventually, I believe that the regulations are setting the pace eventually.
Yeah, I think from the perspective, from the regulatory perspective, around technology. So I think it's hard for regulators to really have that forward focus. But what I do see is the difference in regulators these days, and I see the difference massively here in the UK, is that they recognise they can't keep up with the pace, and therefore they're much more open and engaged. And sometimes there are unintended consequences of regulation, and they're open to that engagement and that challenge. So I think we see much more of that. I think it's unrealistic to expect the regulators to be forward thinking around some of the technology changes. I think it will always be retrospective, but I think their approach to it is less stick-like and tick-box processes. I think there's much more working groups and open engagement these days.
I think, I'll just add to that. I think that's key, right? I think there will be mistakes. There will be things that need to be changed. I don't think with the advancement of technology and the pace it's happening, I don't think things can be set in stone. You'll end up with version 1.0, 2.0. I think that's okay.
Yeah, that is why there is a new trend right now for subtech, which is the supervisory technologies. So there's a new definition out there nowadays, subtech.
I haven't even heard of that. That makes me laugh.
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
Great, guys. Well, thanks very much. I think, there's a lot of interesting insights, regarding, the topic was obviously, what does it take to be a leading merchant payments provider in era of the new normal? I think that it sounds like data is a big part of that. Fraud prevention is a big part of that, and how to tackle that. Working together with merchants as well as providers is a big part of that. So very interesting. Thank you guys for sharing your views with us, and thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rudy.
Have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye.